Welcome to the Sharing Without Shame podcast, dedicated to parents and anyone else who loves someone in active addiction. Education is a powerful tool in breaking down stigma, fostering understanding, and ultimately helping individuals and their loved ones navigate the challenges of addiction. With Donna Marston, author of Peeling the Onion and Sharing Without Shame. So take a deep breath and grab some tissues as we uncover the stories of love, courage, and unwavering support in the face of adversity, as Donna and her guests share their stories without shame. Because when we share our stories without shame, we inspire others to do the same.
Hello and welcome. Today's podcast is sponsored by Snap Bands. It's Snap Therapy. The cognitive behavior therapy bracelet integrates gentle physical sensations with personalized mantra cues to instantly transform unwanted negative thoughts into positive mental focus, stigma-free. So visit www.snappbandz.com and go to the special notes and type in SWOS and let's snap together. This is what the bands look like. Today, I am talking with Jesse Mogle, who specializes in trauma and addiction. He's a recovery coach, a podcast host from sobriety to recovery, and a keynote speaker. So welcome, Jesse.
Welcome. It is a pleasure to be here, Donna. I'm so glad that we've been able to make this happen.
Yeah, me too. Thank you. First question I always ask is, what would you like to share without shame?
One of the things I get frequently asked when I tell people that I'm a life coach, an addiction recovery coach, a business coach, I do a lot of coaching for a lot of different people, is like, sarcastically, or maybe actually in the way that people feel when they hear that somebody's a life coach, is like, oh, then you've got life all figured out. Something I'd like to share without shame is that I've got over 500 podcast episodes between my two shows, and in no way, shape, or form do I practice everything that I preach. That I'm a human, I'm fallible. I get angry with my girlfriend over silly stuff that I should have learned to figure out by now. I use words like should and would and could that are conflictatory and that hurt my feelings and that aren't necessary in this journey. That no matter how many episodes I come up with and no matter how much I feel like I've figured out my life, there's always another myriad of things in the closet that I still haven't even begun to sweep through. So sharing without shame is that I talk a lot about a lot of different subjects, and I know that it helps people because I get that feedback. And at the same time, I will openly admit that I don't do everything that I talk about. And in fact, a lot of the times I bring it to the audience's awareness in hopes that I will further solidify that behavior in myself.
Yeah, well, I think we all do that, don't we? Yeah, I know this stuff even over the years. So my story is I have a son who's a person in long-term recovery, and some of the stuff, I didn't, when I was living through it, I didn't practice or do that stuff. And I guess that's why I talk about it, because I've taken what once was my mess and made it my message in hopes that other people will move forward in doing that. So what does sobriety to recovery mean?
Beautiful that we get to discuss that. So when I first got into addiction recovery, when I first stepped into sobriety on January 13th of 2017, one of the first things that my then therapist taught me was that there's a difference between sobriety and recovery. Sobriety is just saying, I'm no longer going to utilize this substance or this. There's also behavior addictions too, shopping and gambling and things of that nature. So I'm no longer going to participate in taking something through any part of my body or participating in an activity that's addictive. That's taking that away. That's saying I'm going to stop doing it. But it doesn't mean that you're now in recovery. You've just stopped utilizing the thing that was becoming your coping mechanism. The recovery aspect is actually stepping into all of the pain, the suffering, the shame, the guilt, the jealousy, all of those, 7 deadly sins of emotions, if you will, that continue to come at us and saying, okay, well, let's recover through this. Let's actually figure out why I behave the way I do, or I attach the way I do, or I talk the way I do, or I get triggered by the things that I do. Let's figure out where all those things are. Let's pull them out of the shadows. Let's bring them into the light where they can be healed. So that's the overall idea of it.
Yeah. So sobriety. So I work in the field, and sobriety to me would be people think that they're sober, could just be purely abstinent. That's a thought process. And recovery would be that they're working a recovery program, whatever that could, different paths for different people.
Yes.
Do you utilize anything like that, like fellowships or smart recovery? Do you incorporate that into the recovery piece of it, or is it strictly about identifying the emotions, healing the emotions, and just working on the person rather than working support groups?
Yeah, and it's multifaceted, and I really believe in that holistic approach. For me, with Kaiser, there was a relapse prevention class on Monday night. There was also a meeting every Monday morning that we got together with other people within the program that our therapists ran. Then on Wednesday night there was alcohol awareness class. Wednesday night there was also my therapy class. So I immediately incorporated the group setting, the one-on-one setting, as well as I got introduced to neuro-linguistic programming about a month too into my sobriety journey. And then I learned about neuro-linguistic programming and became fascinated with this idea that our five senses feed us all this information, and through some filters and processes, we create a reality in our mind. And that's just what we think is actually happening around us. When in reality, it's just what's happening in our heads. Is it really what's happening out here? And so I got super into neuro-linguistic programming still am. And now I'm a practitioner of it. I teach it to people in addiction recovery all the time. At month 7, I got into refuge recovery and Dharma recovery. I think back then it was just called refuge. Now there's 2 different ones, but still of the same kind of ilk. I got into that because football season was starting and I wanted some more support. So Sundays at 4:00, I'd go to this big group meeting because Sundays and football was my trigger. And then I started doing some SMART. Of course, I've done the AAs and I've done the NAs. Those never stuck as much as SMART and refuge and Dharma recovery stuck. But again, I believe all of it works. Right. So what is somebody's program? It literally is them just determining, like, this is my new schedule. This is my new routine. That's when somebody's like, oh, I've got a program. I'm like, okay, well then label out to me what you're doing each and every day. Oh, I just figure it out each and every day. I am not going to bust anybody's chops about that not being a program, because I'm not going to sit here and tell somebody how to live their life. But at the same time, if you're just willy-nilly picking things out every day and thinking that that's enough, we need structure. We need routine. I want to know where I'm going to be on a Thursday night if I'm going to a meeting. So I do believe in what you just said, that it is a very holistic, all meetings, group meetings, everything matters. It's just a matter of, are you actually in it? Or are you over here on your phone messing around while the meeting's going on? Or are you off in your own little land when you should be paying attention to what's actually happening around you?
Yeah. So when I talk to the parents about things like that, I always say, pay attention, because if your teen or adult child has 1 foot in and 1 foot out,
Yeah.
right?
Then you really have no feet in at all. Right. Today's client day. Today, Wednesdays and Thursdays is client day. So you are fit in between there. So I've already met with 5 and I've got 3 more coming later on today. And when we start to notice a drop off in their journey from sobriety to recovery, it generally comes down to them breaking structure, breaking routine, and being more flippant about it. And I tell them, and they know from the show and from the way I coach, that everything gets run through the umbrella of sobriety to recovery. Everything in your life moving forward is run through this idea of, like, is this going to benefit my sobriety and recovery? Will this benefit other people who love me and their journey from sobriety to recovery? Is this going to benefit the world as a whole that I have created for myself? Because 25 years from now, if we get off our path and we think, oh, I've got this figured out, that little demon's gone. The demon doesn't go away. He just gets really, really quiet and really, really small. And in our school bus of life, maybe he's sitting 4,000 rows back, but it just takes one little hint that there is a weak link for that little bugger to run all the way up the aisle and get right back into the passenger seat, if not take over the wheel. So we just want to be really mindful that the bell's been rung. we have that addiction in us. And while I don't say that I'm an addict when I go to meetings, I'm somebody in long-term recovery. Follow that. I was taught that by Young People in Recovery, YPR, fabulous organization. And I've just believed I start my podcast off with, I'm a person in, hey, this is Jesse Mogle and I am in addiction recovery, because I am recovering. At the same time, I also know that, alcohol can't touch this, cocaine can't enter this, marijuana can't enter this. We're good. We're clean, and that's the way we're going to live our lives now. And I run it through that umbrella. And when people do that, they will have an internal sense of accomplishment, knowing each and every day that what they're doing is fueling their better self.
Yeah. And one of the things, so I'm a real push on kinder language. And I know when people would use the A words, I just can't, I have a hard time with them. It really hurt me as a mom. I felt pain in my heart. And when I had parents come in and they, the first time they say their name and they say my child's whichever one fit. And the first thing I would say is, can we call your child by name?
Yeah.
Because that label is not who they are.
Yeah.
They're a person who has a substance use disorder. Their brains are wired differently. And, we can talk about that. But let's just say, my name is so-and-so, and I have a child who's in active addiction, or I have a child, blah, blah, blah. And when they would come in and I would present that to them, you would see their shoulders relax. They almost, they got a little comfortable. Like, I think I'm safe here, right? Because people, the stigma is with the label, that's not who you are. That's not who my son is. That's just, it's a piece of you, but and my son too, when I speak of him, I always say he's a person in long-term recovery. And what that means is my son hasn't used any mind-altering substances since May 11, 2008.
Exactly.
It just sounds kinder and nicer, right? Like, sure, be a nice human.
Well, exactly. Be a nice human to yourself,
Right.
first and foremost, and we teach, I teach in my neuro-linguistic programming courses for people in addiction recovery that we have to be very mindful of identity level statements. If we look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs and we think about, what is our environment, what becomes our skills, and then our capabilities, then we get to identity. And in order to get to self-actualization, which a lot of philosophical people would say, even psychological people would say, is very difficult to attain to. But since we are on this journey from sobriety to recovery, and assuming that our goal is this actualized, aware human that we would love to be, the identity level statements actually can hold us back from attaining that within. If I say I'm an addict, then, well, January, 12th, 2017, and all those days before, I acted very much like that. Well, now I get to be somebody who's in long-term recovery. Now I am somebody who's sober. I now, earlier today, I was messing around in the kitchen and I did something and I was just like, that was stupid. I'm not stupid. I did something in the moment that wasn't as wise as it could have been, but then let's learn from that. And the next time, let's not do that. But I'm not stupid. I'm not a dummy. I'm not fat. I'm not ugly. I am Jesse. And I am me. And in fact, I'm not even Jesse. That's just another label. So how are we identifying with ourselves? What are we using as our identity level statements? Because who you were yesterday is not who you are today. And it certainly does not have to be who you are tomorrow. So each day, each moment, we get a chance to choose who we want to present ourselves into the world as, and then how are we going to look at ourselves in the mirror? How are we going to talk about ourselves? Because it's very difficult for other people to change the way they talk about us to us, or even behind our backs, if we're still talking about ourselves in a way that doesn't support who we're now achieving to be. And in many ways, it probably already become. We're just not necessarily aware of it as somebody else who's watching us would be.
Yeah, and it's, I think it's old school. Things need to be a little bit more modernized. And I know a lot of the younger generation, they don't want to label themselves. So they won't go to some of the meetings because they don't want to feel like they have to be sick the rest of their lives by using that language. So they stop going. And this one woman that I know, she has gone on the spiritual journey, and her growth is amazing in what she's doing.
Yes.
Right? She just found her path because she just couldn't stay labeled anymore, and she felt stuck, and she had to work through that process to move on. And I think sometimes it works for a lot of people, but sometimes people move on, and that's okay too. Because I know me back then, I didn't understand recovery. So I used to tell my son, 90 meetings, 90 days, get a sponsor, do this, blah, 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 all the stuff. It's what I heard. Knew nothing, had no understanding. And that's what we do as parents, where, you need to do this, you need to do that. And we don't walk the walk. And we don't talk the talk.
So powerful. I'm glad you brought this up, because a lot of the messaging out there is really sobriety based and not recovery based. Go to 90 meetings in 90 days and get a sponsor and work the steps. And these are great. But if we're just working a checklist, that's the sobriety. That's sort of like we're holding on by white knuckles, hoping that today won't be the day that we finally use. And I've seen people in, whether it's any of the fellowships, all the ones we've talked about and other ones we haven't even mentioned yet, that are still, 17 years, it was like, I just hope that God gives me the strength not to use today. And I'm like, if we're still using that kind of languaging at 17 years, like, there's some shifts that we still haven't healed. There's some trauma that's still in there that hasn't been dealt with. And if we're holding on to these identity statements that I'm an addict, or I'm a loser, I'm fat, I'm stupid because I got a bad grade on a test in high school, and that's why I ended up in the college I didn't want, and then that's why I became an addict. We're holding on to trauma, and we're doing so using our own words. It's like we have literally put ourselves in a jail cell that we have the key to get ourselves out of. We're just refusing to utilize it, because at the same time, we have almost become so comfortable seeing ourselves as one version to even think to step into a different version. It's like we are in this cocoon of self-absorption. And if we have to step out of that cocoon, well, there goes our safety bubble. And so the journey into addiction recovery is one of those where you put yourself out there. You're vulnerable in front of people you've shamed yourself in front of. You've got guilt and jealousy and deceit and resentment toward. And now you're asking for amends, and you're asking for forgiveness. But all of that stuff starts within first. If you can't forgive yourself for all those years you seemingly wasted away on addiction, how is anybody else going to be able to forgive you if you're walking around still feeling like you're that old person that you've already said you're no longer that person, but yet you're still holding on to them?
Yeah. So do you do anything? How do you feel about step work? Because I know for some people, and my son too, he went through the steps, and I was a nosy, controlling mother. And when he went through the steps, he was 3 years into his recovery, and it was with a much older man. And I wanted to make sure that it was okay. So I found a woman who would sponsor me the AA way, and I did the process.
That's
Greatest
awesome.
gift I ever gave myself. So I'll take parents through the Melody Beattie book. She has one for the steps. It's a little bit different, and it's a little bit lighter. But I learned the greatest gift it gave me that I learned is that nobody has to live up to my expectations. They're mine.
Yes.
Right? That's a gift.
I have a saying, we see it on the show all the time, that expectations are the leading cause of disappointment. And when you have an expectation for yourself or somebody else, oftentimes they're not even spoken. I could have an expectation for you in this interview, but never tell you. And then when we get off the call and I'm like, oh, she didn't do this, or I didn't say this. And it's like, but I mean, was there ever a conversation? And this is on a micro level. On a macro level, imagine how many different areas that you would have an expectation of how your son should behave and do, and what he should have done. And, oh, he should have been this. And if he hadn't done this, he'd have done this. And it's all these expectations he's trying to live up to that probably weren't verbalized, that certainly weren't agreed upon. And then life is what life is. We all try to go to the grocery store the same old way. And maybe today there's construction and we've got a detour. Life is detours all over the place. Expectations, leading cause of disappointment.
Right. Yeah. And I think it really affects parents, because if their kids, not everybody is one and done, right? It takes. My son was in and out, and took him 5 or 6, maybe 7 times. And every time he would have a reoccurrence, I took it personally. It leveled my expectation, and off we go into this toxic dance. Right?
Yeah.
And I was part of the problem and had no clue. And I think, addiction, how it affects the person who has the substance use disorder and the family members, it's really recovery for everybody. They have
Yes.
to all find a way so that they can have relationships. Even if the person is still active in addiction, there's a way of having a healthier relationship without getting involved in the chaos and the drama.
Yes, there you go. And so I certainly didn't invent what I'm getting ready to say, but I definitely teach what I'm getting ready to say. And in as much as that, if one person in the family is sick, then everybody is sick, because we've
Mhm.
all learned a new way of behaving, a new way of acting, thinking, feeling because of this person's addiction. And we're in a consistent, if not constant, state of trying to shift to reach homeostasis, some sort of balance. So now you've got this addict. So then you change your behavior, then they change theirs, and it becomes this. So now all of a sudden they go off to rehab. They go off to do this. They do the 12 steps. And this is why I support supporters. A lot of my clients end up being people similar to who you are, where it's like they know that their son or daughter, somebody in their that they love needs help. And then so now the person's off at rehab, they're going to meetings, they're working a program. But what's the people who love that person doing? What are they reading? How are they seeking to change? Because it could be like, no, it's my son. He was the addict. He was the one screwing everything up. He needs to fix himself. I'm perfectly fine. And then he
Mhm.
goes off and he fixes himself, but then he comes back and you're still behaving the same way you always did. It's going to re-trigger. It's going to reassess. It's going to do a lot of re's on this. So if we just be okay with the fact that if there's somebody in your family who's sick, then it means that you're sick as well in a different way. And you can be kind and compassionate, and you don't have to have shame or guilt or anger about it. It's just that we're all, I say this a lot too. We are an emotionally unintelligent society. We have been an emotionally unintelligent species for millennia. We believe that greed and decadence and hurting one another is the way to get ahead in life. We've seen it
Mm.
throughout cultures for thousands of years. Instead of being like, hey, I've got some apples, you've got some oranges, why don't we make a really cool fruit salad? It's, I'm going to come over there and take your oranges, and then you have no oranges and I have all the apples. We are an emotionally unintelligent species, and I think it's just now in the last 50, 70 years since World War II, really, where we stepped into this modern era where all of a sudden mental health matters, where we're realizing that the way we used to be is no longer acceptable. And I think it's about time, but it's going to take us a long time to really fully get into this, Donna. I mean, we've been
Yeah.
behaving one way for thousands of years. And just to close a loop there, you asked what I thought about the fellowship. I mean, when, Bill started that up in the 30s, he did so because he just wanted to have somebody else to talk with about his addiction. I think
Mhm.
the fellowship is amazing. I think it's awesome. I think it's
Mhm.
absolutely can be part of what somebody's doing. But if they just go to meetings and that's all they're doing, then they're not doing enough. And I will say that with confidence that there's got to be more. And there's the sponsor work, and there's the giving back to society, and there's being a loving person and working on your communication strategies, your attachment strategies, healing your trauma. There's so much to be done. So to me, it's a piece of a very big puzzle. But for people to
Absolutely.
just say it's the only piece, and if you're not doing AA, then there's no way you're going to be sober. There is
Right.
not a program out there, Donna, that has a higher retention rate than 20%. The recidivism rate is 80% across the board. I
Mhm.
tried getting sober 30 times before it stuck. My last time was my last time, but it was certainly not my first last time.
Yeah. And my son went through the program. He stayed with her for many, many years. He's coming on 14 years, I think. And now he has three babies. He owns a business. So he doesn't get there like he used to. Things have shifted. But he has a core group of guys that they all connect on a daily basis and hold each other accountable. So, that's part of his program. So, as somebody who specializes in trauma and addiction, what are some common misconceptions that people have about the topics that they frequently encounter?
Well, I mean, right there, trauma and addiction, it's how do we even define that? As a species, we all have different ways of interpreting a traumatic moment and then turning that into trauma. So I think for most people, it's just defining what trauma even means, and I mean, there's a lot of ways, but for simplicity's sakes, I'll say what I say on my own show is that we all have traumatic moments in our lives, and then we start to replay them as children. And then the more we replay them, the more we start to see, well, where else might this happen? Because I don't like that traumatic moment. I don't want that to happen again. So then our little child brain starts looking for other things that can resemble that same traumatic moment so we can try to avoid it. And through that, we start making meaning about things that may not even really be real, because we're using a 4-year-old or an 8-year-old or a 12-year-old or an 18-year-old brain who doesn't really have a full scope of what's happening. So then all of a sudden we started creating all of these traumatic moments in our head. They grow and grow and grow and grow. And now we've got this huge trauma where, we're introverted, or we're afraid to fall in love, we're afraid to be vulnerable, we're afraid to ask for what we actually want. And the more we bury it and push it down deep, the more we mute our voice. And when we don't feel heard or seen, we start looking for ways to cope with the fact that we don't feel emotionally supported. And what's going to be the easiest thing to fall into? An addictive substance. And that's
Mhm.
what I really want to stress about addiction is people are like, well, addiction can't be a disease because if somebody has cancer, they didn't ask for cancer, but somebody clearly had to take this thing in order to become addicted. Well, there's a lot of different ways I would love to push back on that. I don't want to come off as a jerk, so I'll just say it as politely as I've figured out how to say it up till now, is that we don't know how many different ways the human can get cancer, but we know that pretty much everything can potentially give us cancer.
Mhm.
So if we could pinpoint how every single person got cancer and be like, oh, well, you got cancer because you kept drinking soda water. And if you hadn't been drinking soda water for 20 years, you wouldn't have gotten cancer. But we can't identify how people get cancer. So we just say, well, it just happened and it was nobody's fault.
Mhm.
But it's something created that. So no human says at 4 years old, boy, I really hope I get addicted to meth. Boy, that'd be really great to just drive my whole life into the gutter, maybe
Yeah.
sell my body for sex and money. Maybe
Yeah.
that would be great. No, 4-year-old's going to do that. But enough trauma happens. And then the next thing you know, they're looking for an emotional coping skill. The human brain, the highest point it can reach with a dopamine release is during a romantic orgasm. Right? So it's that cocaine can shift that to 300%. Meth can put it to 3,000%. So
Wow.
it's the most dopamine that a brain can release at one time in a natural way that was meant by the way the body was created was through an orgasm during sex. And that's 100%. Cocaine can get you to 300%. Meth can get you to 3,000%. I dare a person to do meth and not find some sort of addiction to it after the first time.
Hmm.
So no one wants to become addicted to things and do that to themselves. It just happens. And it's sad and it's heartbreaking and it makes me want to cry for the species.
Hmm.
So when somebody's like, well, they did it to themselves. Yes, you're right in the fact that they kept imbibing it or doing it. But when you are so emotionally broken on the inside and you don't see another way to cope, it's very easy to keep going back to that. And I mean, I know people who eat McDonald's like it's all the time and they're obese and they have heart and coronary issues and nobody's busting their chops about that. But then the meth
Right.
head, somebody wants to bust their chops. So it's like, where can we just be more empathetic and realize that we're all a little sad on the inside, and how we choose to deal with that isn't something to be shamed. It's something to be embraced. I'm getting chills, so clearly this means something. It's something to be embraced and loved. And I mean, I don't know how to get the whole world to follow with what I'm saying, Donna, but I really feel like if we could all just see that there's so much sadness and all we want is somebody to just hug us and tell us it'll be okay. It,
Hmm.
it would change the world.
Right. Well, and you know what? It's chronic, progressive, and deadly, right? And my son, that wasn't his goal to become addicted to heroin. This is my thing is, or the way I describe it is, we're all born with a tiger cub in our gut, and it's asleep. And as you mature, you become a 2 year old, it's a 2 year old cub. And, you start maybe at 14. I think my son started trying cannabis at the age of 15. My husband's family has a lot of issues with drugs and alcohol. And here's my beautiful boy, and here's the tiger. And eventually they switch places. He wakes the tiger up. The more he drinks, the more he ingests or shoots up or whatever, the tiger gets bigger and bigger and bigger. He didn't go looking for that. I think people with a substance use disorder are typically the last ones to find out that they have a substance use disorder.
Yeah.
And everybody else is like trying to make them stop, and often in the wrong way. And I think when people are in active addiction, they need to be loved more, not less. And
Yes.
old school was kick them to the curb, tough love. And I was shamed and blamed because I wouldn't do that to my boy. There was no way I would do it. I was his unhealthy helper. I thought I could love him into recovery. I learned the hard way that I couldn't. But it just, as a mom, I had to do everything in my power to know that, if he did pass, I did the best that I could to help him. Did I do a lot of things wrong? Absolutely. Absolutely. But to this day, I will tell you, anybody in active addiction needs to be loved more, not less, because they're disconnected. And that's why
Yeah.
we have recovery centers where, the type of work that you do, because we want to get them reconnected with
So two,
themselves and
yes.
with a community.
Two things you just said there, I want to make sure we touch upon. The first one was connection. So the opposite of addiction is connection. Again, I
Mhm.
didn't invent it, but I certainly teach that. And the second thing was about the tiger and how we waken it up. I have this whole philosophy that everybody is addicted to something. Everybody has something that they need to heal. Now, somebody else's addiction might just be negative self-talk, or it could be going on Amazon at 3 a.m. and buying silly things they don't need. It could be, it could be something completely internal that doesn't even affect anybody external, but we all have something that is no longer serving us, that is not making our life as amazingly fulfilling as it could potentially be. So when we just step into that and realize that some people, they woke that up. I mean, I think every human, if offered an addictive substance or a behavior addiction at just the right time in their life, that's it, take it and run. And
Mhm.
I remember having a friend, I mean, head of her class, amazing, super intelligent. We were very much on the same track in high school. And, she's off being a brain surgeon now. I mean, literally a brain surgeon. And I remember at the time just be like, we both had these very intense obsessive compulsiveness about ourselves. Neither of us had ever been diagnosed with it, but we were just very intense and we liked things a particular way. I think it's why we got along so well. Well, when I got into college and my parents got divorced that summer right before I went to college and things started to unravel, I needed something to emotionally cope with. And I turned to alcohol and drugs because they were introduced to me at just the right time. My 18th birthday, Pink Floyd, Eighth Row Center, first time I ever got stoned. And it was just like, this is what I've been looking for.
Mhm.
Meanwhile, she went off and did this really cool internship her summer before her freshman year, didn't need any of those, didn't fall herself, and she got in and her emotional coping skill was studying. Mine became addictive substances, both very similar personalities, but at the right time, it's like you're making this amazing recipe, and if at the right time you add the egg, or at the right time you add the baking soda, what could happen to the cupcake?
Right.
For her, she went off and was very successful with her obsessiveness. My obsessiveness said, let's see how much drugs I can do. Let's see how much I can deal. Let's see how many women I can sleep with. Let's see all of this other stuff that was external. She brought hers in internal. It's a timing thing, and I think we all have it in us. And some people are blessed to bypass it in many ways. When it comes to meth and heroin, and, mine was cocaine, ecstasy, LSD, and alcohol. Those were my big four. Some people are blessed to bypass that whole thing, but then they might find themselves with a shopping addiction at 42, or they might find themselves with a constant sense of pessimism that eventually drives everybody they love away from them. We've all got something we need to heal. It's just whether we're willing to be self-aware enough to admit it or not, and release the shame that comes from feeling like you've let people down, first and foremost yourself.
Yeah, and it's hard to work through the pain, right? When you identify that whatever is going on, I mean, everybody has stuff. It doesn't matter if you have an SUD, we all have stuff. We all have things that we aren't proud of or did or said or whatever. But I don't think there's a person in the world that can't benefit from some form of healing.
Yeah.
And going inside, whether it's inner child work, I'm a big component on inner child work, or meditating, journaling, but there's a way to bring it forward that you can start to, instead of carrying that wagon of crap, right? Yeah, you start on unloading it, so life gets a little bit easier and you can start living in joy.
Yeah. I'm studying get my master's right now to become a therapist. And so right now I'm in a class called Theories of Psychology. And so, of course, it comes right out the gate with, Carl Jung and Sigmund Freud and Adolf Adler. And they're three big proponents in their own various ways of discussing that it's the inner child and the unconscious that needs the healing. And there's a lot of different theories of psychology, but all in their own way, they circle back to the same idea that there's something inside of us that needs some healing. And once we start to get in there and figure that out, that's when the blossoming can occur. And, I think when you wake up in a bathtub covered in your own filth, thinking you're having a heart attack and you might die, and you look at yourself in the mirror and think, is this really my end? Is this really how my story unfolds? That this is where Jesse Mogle is found, and my whole family has to realize that I died in a bathtub of my own disgustingness. This isn't, no, this is no longer, no. I mean, I want to use profanity right now, but I'll hold myself back. The things I said to myself that day, I was like, you are done. This is it. You are done. Figure this out, because this is not happening again. When you drop yourself across the bottom of the depths of your soul like that, there's a resiliency that comes from it that I just think, I don't want everyone to have a rock bottom, but I think that it certainly benefits those who have actually embraced their rock bottom to come out of it like a phoenix rising from the ashes. It is something that most humans will never experience the way an addict will. And those who use it as a power, as the rocket fuel, as a nitrous to change everything, nothing will ever be the same.
Yeah. Yeah, we all have to hit our enough.
Yeah.
Even the loved ones. And that's when we stop doing unhealthy behaviors, right? We start allowing that we can put healthy boundaries in place, and we can figure out how to have a healthier relationship, even though our loved one's unhealthy.
Well, you touch upon a beautiful point right there, and I feel like there's another question coming, so I won't interrupt too long. But that's why I love supporting supporters. I have this whole coaching program. I have this whole emotional resiliency workshop that I run people just like you or my parents or now me, because now I've got family members that are, I'm 47. I've got family members that are 22 that are now going through the addiction issues I was going through at 22. 22 for me feels like it was yesterday. It was 25 years ago. So I have a whole new perspective. So when people who are in your position reach out and they're like, I don't know what to do, but I know that I've been enabling for way too long, but I can't cut them off. I can't completely disappear. Like, how do I support them, but also support myself and stop feeling used and enabling and stop giving? Like, how do I prop my loved one up on their own 2 feet and say, you've got to figure this out, but still be there to let them know that I haven't abandoned them? I'm amazed at how much work I have ended up getting through that kind of perspective. Supporting supporters to me is, it matters to me because I've gone to hundreds of addiction recovery centers and given hundreds of speeches on this. And years ago, I would tell them, look, you guys are here and you're learning cool new things, but out there, nobody's learning anything new. So you're going to leave this awesome bubble that this place has created for you, and you're going to go back out there into the mad, chaotic world. And nobody out there has going to put in nearly as much effort as you have in here. So you're going to have to give them some levity and some love and compassion that they're not going to know how to deal with the new you. And then I got tired of saying that. And I thought, well, why isn't somebody filling this void? So I'm doing my best as this one-man band with this show and all to be that person who teaches the supporters how to support so that they don't feel like they're just running on empty all the time. Because Al-Anon certainly has its pros, but again, you're not getting taught a lot of things. There's not a lot of crosstalk. You're not allowed to give feedback. You're not allowed to coach. So people go in there and they just talk. But where's the action? Where's the system? Where's the program? Where's the new strategies? That's what people can turn to me for.
Right. Yeah. And that's why I do what I do, because I tried Al-Anon and they told me to keep coming back. And it was like, I don't have time. Are you kidding me? My son could die tomorrow. I need to know the answer today. And by the way, my child's not like your kids or your husband or whoever. Just give me the answer so I can go. And they kept telling me to come back. And I had a really hard time with that. So, I went on this journey all by myself, which was very lonely and painful, and made a lot of messes. And have taken what was once my mess and now it's my message to help other people so that they don't feel emotionally and financially bankrupt like I did.
Yeah.
Because as a parent, you know, I thought throwing money at it would make it go away, right? Just, trying to love him and do everything and paying off his dealers and,
Yeah.
it, and so I ended up with post-traumatic stress disorder, which is very common.
Very.
I've had parents, get really, really sick. And we get as sick, if not sicker, than the person with a substance use disorder. And I think I was sicker than my son because I wasn't self-medicating. I was feeling my pain.
Yeah. Yeah, and there's what is the book called The Body Keeps the Score, right?
Yeah.
So the body's keeping all of that in, and it breaks my heart to hear you when you said that you were doing it all alone and you felt like isolated, because it can be isolating too, because we still live in a society. And I love the title of your show, Share Without Shame, because we live in a society that loves to shame. And so I have this whole philosophy on guilt and shame. Guilt is when you break your own internal code. Shame is when you break society's a code that's external. So we feel guilt about the things we've done. But if nobody knows I did it, then I don't really have to feel any shame. It's only, you only start to feel shame if you know you're breaking a lot of moral, ethical codes that society holds on to. And oddly enough, even in 2024, with all of this new ways of talking about race and gender and orientation and identities and all this other stuff, there's still this insane stigma that comes with addiction. And in Los Angeles, it's celebrated. So that's where I got sober, and it's celebrated. Like they're building statues for every person who gets sober there. But now I live in North Alabama, where if you go around and tell people that you're in addiction recovery, right, you might get side eye. If you tell people that you've got a son who's addicted to meth, you might, even though those very same people might be having a cousin who's going through that, right? It's this weird social stigma. And so, when I go and give speeches now at like businesses and stuff, I frame it as, is there somebody in your life you want to support who's going through a tough time? It could be addiction, it could be an illness, a disease, something. Come in here and let's talk about how you can support them. What turns out when people actually pull me aside or set up meetings with me is that they actually came in knowing that they were the person who needed the help, but it was a lot easier for them to go into a room where I talked about them helping other people. And it's because like then my coworkers will never know it's actually me who needs this help. That I love that they came, and I'm just like you, I'm sure love when people come in front of you and say, I need help. But it breaks my heart that they have to do all of that with so much shame. Like that,
Hmm.
Brene Brown talks all the time that the greatest way to release shame is to step into the vulnerability. And yet when we do that, we somehow get rejected. And then like that only makes it worse. I want to
Right.
be vulnerable. I want to release this shame. And then society's like, not that. This we'll accept, but that you're still disgusting human. And now you feel even more rejected, more isolated, more alone. And it just feeds itself. Empathy. Can we all just
And
not step into empathy?
and I think too, I just did a blog on the evolution of generations
Oh, tell
with
me about
addiction,
this.
with addiction. And how, the silent generation would be my parents, that would be now in their 90s, and how don't make waves, like don't talk about anything, don't talk about your home life. I'm a baby boomer, and children were to be seen but not heard. So I
Mhm.
had a secret when my son was in active addiction. I didn't want anyone to know. We're not the perfect family, right? And then you get as sick as your secret. And then with the, I don't remember all the generations, there's a Generation X, people start talking about it a little bit more. And now we're down to the Generation Z, like the 27-year-olds to the millennials. They're very open about addiction and mental health. They're very
Yeah.
loving and kind. And it's shifting where you can talk about it, and you're not going to be like, ooh, go stay away from, Jesse, because
Yeah.
he used to use drugs, right? You don't want to be around him. It's not like that. They're very open and honest about their own mental health. And it's amazing to watch the
Yeah.
evolution of it through the
It
generations.
is. I say our trajectory when it comes to our openness about our emotions and our mental health and wellness and addictions is growing. It's very interesting to me, how different current generations experience this stuff versus, like you said, the silent generation, the baby boomer generation. And I think we're going to see a gigantic shift in the workplace dynamics as far as
Mhm.
like business code of conduct, rules, ethics, how they're willing to hire people. The more of the boomers retire and the more the Xers, which I am one, I'm an Xer, the more we start to take over and we start to rewrite the code of conduct and business ethics that the business is willing to follow, that whole dictate of this is how we're going to behave. Because I don't believe that somebody who's been arrested for a felony and charged and spent some time in prison should not be allowed to vote. I don't think that they should be have it held against them when they go for a job. Now, certain jobs might fall within that, okay, that
Yeah.
person shouldn't have that job. I don't know if I want them running a daycare center, but certainly I don't see why that thing that they did in their 20s that they have since paid their pittance for should be still holding against them in their 50s, let alone the addiction and tattoos. When I was in the 80s, and so you're a boomer, so that was, we're both. I mean, just imagine what the 80s were like 30, 40 years ago for us. People with tattoos were sailors and miscreants and prostitutes and vagabonds and homeless, right? And now, the PTA Mother of the Year's got a tattoo, right? She's got 6 of them and a sleeve on her ankle, right? Like that has changed so dramatically in 40 years. Like, piercings are no, if somebody wants to put purple in their hair, nobody cares anymore. So we've already seen an amazing shift in appearance. Now, can we allow there to be some amazing shifts in the way that we decide how we're going to judge somebody else's personality? I mean, mind you, I'd love it if we just stopped judging people right off the bat, but let's be realistic. We're humans. But can we change the way that we decide to judge people and say, well, I mean, yeah, I prefer you didn't go to prison, or I prefer you weren't addicted to meth for 20 years, but you're clean now. You've paid your price. What can you do for society now? Let's do that. And
Mhm.
let's bring them back in, because the
Mhm.
opposite of addiction is connection. You keep isolating somebody and you expect them not to act out. You clearly have not paid attention to the animal kingdom well enough.
Right. And that's why there's recovery community centers throughout the country. And
I said the opposite of addiction is connection, paying attention to isolation. Something in there triggered a real positive
see,
thought.
this is what happens when you age.
This is
Gone
what
are
happens when
the,
you get excited during a conversation. You and I are pretty excited right now.
yeah, yeah, it's crazy. Well, we're getting ready to wrap up. Talk to me about you do something with college kids.
Yeah, so I have a whole nother show. So this is the one that you found me because of the From Sobriety to Recovery. I also have another one. I've even brought it up for you. So it's College Success Habits. This is the one this is for middle school, high school, college age, anybody in school, really, the youth. Heck, it could be for parents of them. But basically it's this show just talked about for this demographic. So it's the same kind of mental health kind of thoughts. The idea behind it being that I look back at my life at 8 years old is really when my addiction started to show itself. Any therapist worth their weight in salt would have noticed it had my parents put me into therapy, but they didn't. Traumatic moments, traumatic moments. Mom has Crohn's, dad's a workaholic. They get divorced at 17, go off to college, need emotional coping skills, drugs and alcohol step in. So I basically created that podcast and wrote this book as a compendium to the podcast for hopes that the youth can read this, listen to this show, learn emotional coping skills, and not need this show one day. If you listen to this show, let's hope you don't need this show. And I just cannot, everybody needs healing from something. Donna, we've discussed that already. The ones who I think don't even know how to talk about it, like you and I, we have some age with us, we're older. I honestly don't really care what people think about me. Somebody asked the other day, when do you stop caring about Jesse, how did you decide to stop caring what people thought about you? And I was like, well, I turned 40 for starters. And there's something about doing that. And you're just like, love me, hate me, you choose you, I choose me, I love me. But people at the age that this show is meant for, they don't know how to do that. And they're so afraid of being isolated and left behind that they'll bend their morals, ethics, values, opinions, beliefs. They'll bend those to the will of anyone who will show them love. And
Mhm.
I can't help but stress that, it's a shame that kids feel so the high school is this weird jungle of testosterone and estrogen. so many hormones. Nobody wants to be isolated. So what do they do as the answer to that? They figure out ways to isolate other people so they don't feel isolated. So then they bully and they pick on and they mean girl people. And I'm like, but they all have the same fear that they'll be seen as uncool, or they'll be unloved, or they'll be isolated, or they'll have no friends. And on a Friday night, they're sitting at home studying algebra instead of at the football game. They all have the same worry. They just go about different ways of expressing it. So I really hope that more people would listen to this, read this, follow this. I'm not the end all be all answer guy, but I am certainly a really great component of a well-rounded holistic mental wellness program.
So how do people get in touch with you, get your books, find your podcasts?
Brilliant. I've created a website, super easy. It's my name, jessemogle.com. If you find this, from sobriety to recovery, we've talked about it. College success habits, you go and you type in either of these two things, you will definitely be taken to my website. I'm the only Jesse Mogle on the planet. I have searched for somebody else with my name, and I have yet to come. I know I am blessed to have that kind of literally like singular name that could be said for on that regard. So if you type Jesse Mogle into the Googles, I will be the only one who comes up. Now, back when I was a drunk and a drug addict and I got arrested a lot, that backfired in my face a lot. Luckily,
they could find you easily.
Yeah, it was real easy. I actually got dumped by a girl one time because her parents found out that we got arrested because they Googled my name. And
geez.
Because I'm the only Jesse Mogle, it showed up that we had been arrested. And it was like, you were with my daughter in this city. You left our house that night and came back the next morning and said everything was fine. You actually spent the night in jail. So the name thing has become an issue in the past. But now that I'm no longer doing that, it's an easy way to find me. So go to jessemogle.com. If you want to reach out to me, go to Ask Me on there. I've got some Google forms. Click on the coaching or the speaking. Click on any of those. Send me over a form. Me and my assistant keep an eye on that regularly. Obviously, on the socials, I'm the only Jesse Mogle. So go on TikTok, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, any of those at Jesse Mogle. My book is on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Walmart, anywhere you buy books. My podcasts are anywhere you listen to podcasts. And if you need those links, I send them over to you. But it's not hard to find me. So it's up to you to take the first step. And I promise you, I will take the second step as soon as I hear from you.
So before I end, any words of wisdom that you'd like to end this podcast with?
I ask such a similar question, and I purposely don't come prepared with an answer so it can be something fluid. Words of wisdom. Let's look for opportunities to love. It seems that our brains are so programmed for opportunities to shame, opportunities to hate, opportunities to be angry, and opportunities to be jealous and resentful. They're all of those. Any negative emotion any human has possibly experienced today, it's like our brain is prone to just go after those opportunities. But what if we stepped into opportunities to love, opportunities to be empathetic, opportunities to reach out and pick somebody up who may not look anything like us, may have completely different beliefs and opinions than us. Hell, they may have just got done screaming in our face and then tripped over their own words, and now we reach down and we pick them up. Don't treat others as they've treated you. Treat others as you would like to be treated. Just refuse to lose and never quit. We only fail when we stop trying. There is no failure. There's only feedback. Look for opportunities to love, and that could be the beginning of an amazing experience for everybody on this planet. We have no idea the butterfly effect of just a smile and a head nod and how you doing. It could literally change somebody's entire existence, and you'll never even know, but the universe will. And I think that's the most important part.
Right. Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate you coming on. I honor you and your work, and it's been great. Thanks.
Thank you. I honor you and yours. You're an amazing person. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you for tuning in. If you'd like to support the Sharing Without Shame podcast, please subscribe, like, and leave a review. If you're in need of emotional support, Donna offers private sessions. For more information about Donna and the services she offers, visit www.sharingwithoutshame.com or email her at Donna, 4, support@comcast.net. Nothing in the Sharing Without Shame podcast is intended to establish a therapist-patient relationship or intended to replace the services of a trained therapist, doctor, or health professional, or substitute for professional mental health, medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Until next time, may your faith and strength heal your heart.